welcome to this jazz guitar lesson. I'm Chris Whiteman. Thanks for joining me. Today we are looking at Kenny Burrell's version of Duke Ellington's Satin Doll, and this is from Kenny's album Lotus Blossom. This is a great example of how to harmonize a melody in a guitar trio situation where you don't have another harmonic instrument, right? So we have guitar, bass, and drums on this cut. And it's a particularly good example of applying drop two voicings. So for a large percentage of the harmonization, he is using drop two voicings. So if you've worked on your drop two voicings, but you haven't applied them in a musical context yet, this is going to be a great example. All right, so let's take a look at what's going on. So there is a 4-bar introduction, which is basically the Ellington introduction, maybe slightly different rhythms. And Kenny is using the interval of the sixth to harmonize this melody in the introduction, and it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So I'm starting with the melody note E, and I'm harmonizing it with the interval of the sixth below E. So we have G and E, and he slides in on the end of beat 1, so it's syncopated. 2, 3, 4, 1, and, right? 1, and then he jumps down to C, and now we have harmonization with an E, so that's a minor 6. This was a major 6 interval. We're moving to a minor 6, and then we're going to move up to D and F. So that first measure, 1 and 2, 3 and then we have the exact same notes, different rhythm. So in bar 2, it comes in on the downbeat of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and. All right, so you put those two measures together, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and then bar 3 is just like bar 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, 3 and then we have this finish where he moves chromatically from E up to G, and the way he harmonizes that is E gets harmonized with the G, and then the shape is going to change to the minor 6 shape. We have F and A, F sharp and A sharp, to G and B. And again, that's very similar to Ellington's original introduction that he played on piano. So those are the first 4 bars. And I'll play it again with the metronome. I'm going to put it on 96. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that takes us into the first melody statement. We can look at this as an A section, right? This is a 32-bar form. It's going to be A, A, B, A. They're all 8-bar sections. And so I'm going to play the first 8 bars with the metronome, and then we'll break down each voicing and talk about it. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so the first harmony is D minor 7, and the melody note is A on top of that. And what he does is he actually uses an F major 7. This is a drop 2 root position, F major 7, F, C, E, A. But the bass player is playing D, and so we're thinking about this in relation to a D root, and that would give us a D minor 9, right? So we're getting a nice color. But again, it looks just like an F major 7. If you know that drop 2, it's functioning as a D minor 9. And he does a really nice aesthetic thing where he just slides down a half step and right back, right? And then the harmony changes to G7. and he moves to a G13, right? And that's F, B, E, and then G on the top. That's the melody. And then right back to D minor 9. And this is a big chunk of what he does in this tune because it's 3 A sections, so you're going to get a lot of this motion. Right? 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and 1 and 2 and 3 and then that is a sequence. It's going to move up a whole step, and you're going to do the same thing now thinking about E minor to A7. And what he does is he actually slides in to the E minor 9 from a half step below, right? Again, this looks like a G major 7, but when you put E in the bass, E minor 9, right? So he approaches on the end of beat 4, preceding the downbeat of E minor. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 and 2, right? 2, 3, 4, and 1 and 2, 3, and all right. So E minor 9, I'm sliding back down to E flat minor 9, back to E minor 9, to A13, back to E minor 9, right? And that A13 has G, C sharp, F sharp, and A, right? And then we have the E minor 9 syncopated coming on the end of 1, 1 and 2, back to the A13 on beat 3, and then back to E minor 9 on the end of beat 3. Okay, so let's put the first 4 measures of the A section together. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so this takes us into bar 5 of the A section. It's going to be bar 9 on the chart because of the 4-bar intro, if you're looking at that. And the most common harmony at this point is going to be some type of A minor with the D in the melody. So A minor 11 or A minor 7 flat 5 with the 11. But Kenny uses a sub here. So he uses an E flat major 7 with a 6 and a 9, which is really cool. I like it. But I think it's important to understand the rationale behind this. Why E flat? Well, if you had A half diminished, A minor 7 flat 5, embedded in that chord is an E flat 6, right? So he's basically using that E flat. He's putting it in the root and then building out a lush voicing of an E flat 6, 9 with the major 7. So we have E flat, G, which is your 3rd, C, which is your 6th, F is your 9, B flat is your 5th, and D is your major 7, right? So I think of it as an inversion of A minor 7 flat 5. It doesn't correspond exactly, but it is a really nice sub. So that's what he plays in place of the A minor. And then he moves right to D7. And I have D, and then your dominant 7th, which is C. F sharp is your 3rd. Another flat 7 or dominant 7, another C here, right? So 3, 4, 1 and 2, 3, and he hits that D. I'm getting it under the index finger, right? 1 and 2 and 3, and then down to A flat minor 9. Here at the 4th fret, I have G flat, which is my flat 7. I have C flat, which is my minor 3rd. E flat is my 5th. And B flat is my 9th. So A flat minor 9, rootless. There's no A flat. You could grab that if you wanted to. Put the root in the bass if you don't have a bass player. He has a bass player, so he is not grabbing the root. And then this A flat minor is going to move to D flat dominant, right? And he plays a D flat 9, rootless again if you wanted the, that's what it would look like with the root. He starts with the third, F, and then C flat would be your flat seventh, E flat is your 9, and then the melody note is B flat, which now is the 13 in relation to D flat, right? So those extensions, you know, I'm always looking at them in relation to the root of the chord, not the bass note in my voicing, because that's not always the root of the chord, right? So A minor 9, D flat 9, and then he resolves to C6 9. Again, rootless. So E is my third, A is my 6, D is my 9, G is my 5th. If you wanted to put the root in there to kind of hear that, that's what it would sound like. And that's the end of the melody statement for the first A section. But we have a turnaround, a very cool turnaround. So we resolve to C, but we have to get back to D minor for the beginning of the second A section. And he plays C, and then he goes to F, to E, to A, right? This is a very common turnaround. It would be 1, 4, 3, 6. So that's analysis of the root motion against the key center of C, or in the key of C here. And what's interesting about his choices is that he plays C6 9. Nothing unusual about that. But when he goes to the 4 chord, oftentimes we will hear the 4 as a major, or sometimes dominant in this kind of turnaround, but he makes it minor 9. So he goes C6 9, F minor 9, which is just a really nice variation. And then he moves to E minor 7 to A7 sharp 9. Right? So those voicings, we talked about the C6 9, F minor 9. I have F, A flat is my 3rd, E flat is my 7th, G is my 9th. Then the pinky stays there, everything else moves down a half step. And I have an E minor 7, E is my root, G is my 3rd, D is my 7th, and G is my 3rd again. So this is what we call double lead voicing, because we have the lead note doubled in the chord. That's an arranging term. And then we finish with an altered A7. And what does this A7 do for us? It creates a cadence back into D minor, right? So he chooses A7 sharp 9, really nice choice. I have A, root, C sharp's my 3rd, G is my 7th, and then C, or B sharp, would be your sharp 9, right? And you probably know this voicing, the Purple Haze voicing. It's the same 4 notes, just different string set, right? And so that turnaround sounds like this. 2, 3, 4, and... All right, so let's put the whole A section together in time. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that takes us to the second A section, which is very similar. There's a few variations. We have a couple of counter lines, and then a different type of harmonic motion where the turnaround was in the first A section. We have some varied harmonic motion that's going to then lead us into the bridge, the B section. So I'll play through the A section in time, and then we'll break that down. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so it starts off the same, D minor 9 with the half step slide. 13, back to D minor 9, and then he adds this counter line here. We have G to E. That's it. All right, so that is A, G, A, F sharp, and then back to E minor 9 to A13. We have our same sub change, E flat, major 7 with the 6-9, D7, A minor 9, D flat 9 with the 13 in the melody, and then this new harmonic motion, he plays C6-9, and then we have F over G, and the bass player is playing G in the bass, so it's giving you a G9 sus sound. So 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Back to the C6-9, and then we have this short little chord stab where he plays a G7 sharp 5 flat 9. Right, and that's leading in to the bridge. And what we'll do, we're going to come back and do part 2. We look at the bridge and then take the tune out. All right, so my recommendation would be to work this up so you can get your technical proficiency higher, and then try to play along with Kenny Burrell, play along with the recording from his album, so that you can really start to absorb, his essence, his time feel, and really hone the nuances, his articulation. I try to capture his tone. I love his tone. I mean, he's one of my favorite players. So I spend a lot of time just listening and trying to emulate. There's no substitute for that process of really immersing yourself, spending time with a master. So I hope you found this information useful. Everything we went over is available as a PDF download for my Patreon subscribers. I'll put a link in this video description for those interested in exploring a membership there. And I'll be back shortly with part 2, where we look at the bridge and take it through the end of the tune. So see you next time.